Winning the lottery was supposed to change my life forever, but it quickly turned into a nightmare I never saw coming. I had always been careful with my money, living modestly and saving every penny I could. So when the news came that I had won $620,000, I felt like all my hard work had finally paid off. I imagined paying off debts, traveling, maybe even buying a small house or starting a business. But before I could even process the excitement, my parents entered the picture with an expectation I had never anticipated. From the moment I told them, their reaction wasn't joy or pride, it was a demand. My parents had always treated my sister as the perfect child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who deserved everything without effort. She had this golden reputation in the family, a combination of charm, manipulation, and our parents' favoritism. They looked at me with eyes that said, "You won this, but it's really hers." They wanted me to share my entire lottery winnings with her, as if my hard-earned luck was a family entitlement. At first, I tried to reason with them. I explained that the money was mine, that I had bought the ticket, that I deserved to make my own choices. I told them I was willing to help them and even assist my sister in reasonable ways, but they refused to listen. The phrase they kept repeating over and over haunted me: "You don't want to disappoint us, do you?" It wasn't just a question, it was a weapon. They wanted to guilt me into handing over what I had won. The pressure escalated quickly. My parents started monitoring everything I did, asking me where I planned to spend it, questioning every decision. My sister, who was already sly and self-centered, started inserting herself into every conversation, dropping hints about how I should consider her needs first. It was suffocating. I felt trapped in a web of expectations and emotional manipulation, and every time I tried to stand my ground, I was met with disappointment and subtle threats. One night, I stayed up staring at my reflection in the mirror, thinking about what to do. This money was supposed to bring freedom, not stress and conflict. I realized that if I continued trying to negotiate or explain myself, I would lose not just the money but also my peace of mind. So I made a decision that surprised even me. I decided to disappear, not in a dramatic, Hollywood sense, but in a way that would allow me to reclaim control over my life and my winnings. I began by liquidating some of my assets discreetly and transferring funds to accounts that my family couldn't access. I changed my routine, started avoiding places where they would expect to run into me, and limited communication. I didn't vanish entirely, I stayed careful, knowing that leaving traces would only invite them to hunt me down. It felt strange, almost like a secret mission, but every step I took reminded me that this was my life, my choice, and no one could force me into sacrificing my happiness. The first few weeks were nerve-wracking. I checked my accounts obsessively, watched for any sign that someone had discovered my plan, and felt the constant anxiety of being caught. But as days turned into weeks, a sense of liberation began to take root. I could finally make decisions without guilt, without interference, without anyone treating my success as something owed to someone else. I started small, buying things I had wanted for years but had put off. I rented a small, cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood where no one knew me. I began investing in my own future, taking courses, and planning trips that were just for me. What surprised me the most was how freeing it felt to remove the toxic influence from my life. My parents and sister didn't know where I was, and I felt the first real sense of independence I had ever experienced. I realized that the $620,000 was more than money, it was a symbol of my freedom, a tool to build a life on my own terms. I didn't need anyone else's approval, and I certainly didn't need to be guilted into giving up what I had earned. Eventually, I started feeling more confident and in control. I wasn't running forever, I was just stepping away from a situation that would have stolen my joy. I knew I had made the right choice when I noticed that the constant tension and emotional blackmail had disappeared from my life. For the first time, I could enjoy my winnings without fear or resentment, and I could focus on myself rather than trying to satisfy a family that saw me as a bank rather than a person. In the end, disappearing wasn't about avoiding responsibility, it was about reclaiming it. I learned that sometimes, standing up for yourself means stepping away from the very people who claim to love you. The $620,000 was more than just a win, it was a catalyst for my independence, my happiness, and my peace. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly free to live for myself. I had always dreamed of winning the lottery, but I never imagined that winning would reveal the true colors of my family. When I held the ticket that eventually turned into $620,000, I felt a rush of disbelief and excitement. This was my moment, a reward for years of hard work and careful saving. I pictured the freedom it could bring, the bills paid off, debts cleared, maybe even a new start in a city where no one knew me. But reality hit me faster than I expected, and it wasn't what I had hoped for. The first hint of trouble came when I told my parents about the win. Instead of the warm congratulations I expected, I was met with expressions that blended envy, greed, and entitlement. My sister, who everyone in the family treated as perfect, the so-called golden child, immediately positioned herself at the center of the conversation. My parents, without a second thought, told me that I had to share my winnings with her. They framed it as a moral obligation, claiming that family comes first, but it didn't feel like guidance. It felt like coercion. I tried reasoning with them, explaining that I had bought the ticket myself, that it was my luck, my decision, and my money. I suggested compromises, like helping with her education or supporting her in some meaningful way, but my parents refused. They insisted on a full share for her, as if my hard-earned windfall was theirs to redistribute. My sister's voice was a constant undertone in every discussion, reminding me how she deserved it, how she had always been there for the family, how this money could finally make her life perfect. The guilt they tried to impose was suffocating, and I realized quickly that logic had no power here. The pressure became unbearable. My parents monitored my every move, asking where I planned to spend the money, implying that any decision not approved by them was selfish or irresponsible. My sister's interference escalated. She would casually mention things she wanted, gifts, vacations, even investments, in front of me as if it were a subtle command rather than a request. I began to feel trapped in my own home, in my own life, as though I was living under a microscope of manipulation and expectation. One evening, after yet another tense argument about giving her a portion of the winnings, I sat alone in my room and reflected on my situation. I realized that no amount of reasoning would change their mindset. They were conditioned to see me as an extension of their authority and my sister as the only worthy beneficiary. I understood, in that quiet moment, that trying to please them would only cost me my independence, my happiness, and ultimately the money that symbolized both. That night, I made a decision that felt drastic but necessary. I would disappear. Not completely vanish, but enough to reclaim my life and protect what I had earned. The plan required careful execution. I started by transferring my money to accounts inaccessible to my family and liquidating some of my assets quietly. I changed my daily routines, avoided family gatherings, and limited contact to what was absolutely necessary. It wasn't easy. Every step carried the anxiety of being discovered, of being tracked down, of facing the inevitable confrontation if they realized what I was doing. But with each move, I felt a growing sense of liberation, like I was reclaiming my life one choice at a time. Living independently gave me a perspective I had never had before. I rented a small apartment in a city where no one knew me and began making plans for my future. I started investing in myself, taking courses, and exploring opportunities that had always seemed out of reach. Simple things, like buying a new laptop or treating myself to a small dinner without guilt, became symbols of my autonomy. Every decision I made reminded me that this money, and the freedom it represented, belonged to me alone. The weeks that followed were transformative. My parents and sister didn't know where I was, and the constant pressure to give in or justify my actions disappeared. I could think clearly, without the cloud of manipulation or expectation, and for the first time in years, I felt empowered. The $620,000 wasn't just money anymore, it was a symbol of control, independence, and the chance to define my own life on my terms. It wasn't easy emotionally, though. Part of me missed my family as they should have been, supportive and loving, not demanding and controlling. But every time I reflected on their behavior, I realized that protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. The lesson was harsh but vital. Sometimes the people closest to you can be the ones who try to take away your happiness, and standing up for yourself might mean stepping away. In the end, disappearing wasn't about abandoning my family, it was about claiming my own life. I could live freely, make my own choices, and enjoy my winnings without fear of judgment or guilt. The $620,000 had initially seemed like a ticket to a better life, but in reality, it became the catalyst that taught me the value of independence, self-respect, and boundaries. I had won much more than money, I had won control over my own destiny.